And we're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sport. It's a Thursday, and we are about to start the weekend's coverage because, first of all, we've got rugby tonight. South Africa will be taking on Italy this evening. Oh, South Africa will be taking on Italy. South Africa will be taking on Bristol Bears this evening before South Africa or the Springboks take on Italy on Saturday. So, two games, less than 48 hours between the two, and a lot of answers to a lot of questions, a lot of big tests of depth, a lot of opportunities to look at players and stuff like that, which is going to be very exciting. And I think that we're both teams under a lot of pressure at the moment, and SA Rugby under a lot of scrutiny, under a lot of pressure, and the best thing possible to try and rectify all of this is to go out and win games. You know, at the end of the day, you know, there's a lot of controversy surrounding Springboks, a lot of controversy surrounding Erasmus, a lot of issues around referees, etc. A lot of talk about South African fans and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, the best thing to do, the best possible solution for all of this is for both teams to go and do their talking on the field and to go and get good results. At the moment, we're sitting on 0 from 3 so far on this tour. We win this match tonight, we win the match on Saturday. Suddenly, we are 2 from 5, which is not great, but at least you have got some victories under the belt. At least you are bringing a couple of performances on the pitch, and it's not just this whole, oh, well, you're losing and this is why you're getting upset, etc., etc. So, yeah, it's quite a lot of ramifications, I think, towards this weekend, and maybe many more than they probably should be. And all of a sudden, a game against Italy, which I think 6 months ago would have been viewed as a opportunity to build depth, as a pretty much a pretty settled win, as a match that wouldn't have been that important, is all of a sudden crucial to our season because it's actually no longer just about the result. It's about the performance and it's about the result in context with everything else. We can't just go out and win and beat Italy, for example. We've got to go out and make a statement. Because the problem, I think, at the moment with the Boks is that we've yet to really put away teams this year. A couple of performances, for example, that last performance against Wales, we did put a team away, but we haven't really sort of seen that sort of like 10 out of 10 complete performance where the Boks looked very comfortable, got the victory done, and sort of really flexed their sort of world champions tag and their muscles and sort of really sort of come across as the dominant force in world rugby, which is why there are question marks over whether they are the dominant force, for example, whether they are a top side at the moment. And I don't think they're anything. I think a lot of those question marks actually came from South African supporters. I think most of your, for example, the Irish supporters, the French supporters, whilst they're complaining about, moaning about fans moaning about referees and Erasmus, etc. In terms of on-field performance, I don't think there are any international sides who are looking at the Springboks saying that's an easy game. So yeah, I think it's an important game. An important opportunity for a couple of French players, but more importantly, as a Boks squad, we've got to go out and we've got to beat Italy pretty well. Italy at Bristol, and Italy. I'm right. Italy. There's too many games on at the moment. That's very important because, as I said, it's for as long as we're not performing well, there will always be those question marks. There will always be that sort of little bit of antsy behavior. There will always be those sort of doubts and stuff like that. So it's unfortunate again where the results it's so much more than the result, and this Italian side is not to be taken lightly. They have named an unchanged 15 from last weekend. Still no Polo got busy, for example, which is quite a nice thing from a Springbok point of view because he is very good. But it's a bit of a shame because I like to see him and I like to see us being tested by somebody like him. So yeah, and I think this Italian side has beaten Wales. It has now beaten Australia, so it's not an easy Italian side. As Italian sides go, it's definitely one of the better ones throughout their sort of history. But that actually can't matter because this is our big opportunity. We've got to go out and we've got to dominate Italy, and then we're going to go and beat England. And we have to do these things to try and salvage what has been a semi-successful season. The Rugby Championship, as I said, was semi-successful. We were 2 points away from winning. We were probably one win. If we'd beaten the All Blacks in the Ellis Park, which we probably should have done, we would have won the Rugby Championship. So we do look at that Rugby Championship as one that got away, and I think it's frustrating because we should have added that trophy to the cabinet, and we weren't able to. But yeah, there was good moments. Beating All Blacks quite outplaying the All Blacks was good moments. Beating Argentina twice, for example, another team did that. That loss against Australia was frustrating. So, and that's kind of been the case for the entire year, where we've had some very good results and then some very disappointing results. Obviously, that Welsh second test is a big sort of blotch in the results for this year. But again, it was a completely new look side, and they almost did win. So, you win that game, you win the All Blacks game, and you sit there thinking, right, well, we've only lost to, we had lost to Australia. We would won the Rugby Championship, for example. We would have whitewashed Wales. And even if we were 0 from 2 now, you sit there saying it's still been a pretty good year. However, we didn't whitewash Wales, we didn't win the Rugby Championship, and now we're 0 from 2. So all of a sudden, it's looking like a bit of a disaster year for the Boks. So in order to try and salvage it, you've got to look at the positives in defeat, if there are any. And that's the biggest problem, I think, is that certain, in some games when we have been beaten, there's like, well, what can we take from this? And sometimes it's a case of there isn't much we can take out of this. Sometimes the case there's a lot we can take out of it. And I think that's, we're hoping that every loss needs to be a lot of lessons. And I think that there are things we could take out of the Irish game. There are definitely things we could take out of the French game. Far more out of the French game for me than the Irish game. Because a 14-man Springbok side went toe-to-toe with France for a good half an hour. And then a 30-man Springbok side lost towards the end. So, you fix the discipline, for example, you beat France. It's that simple. And that is a good place to be in if you're beating France in France a year out from the World Cup, where the World Cup is being held against one of the tournament favourites. 3 points within Ireland, the number one ranked side in the world, is a decent place to be in. But you're also thinking, well, we should have won that game. We could have won that game had we converted our pressure into points, which is becoming a bit of an issue. So those are sort of things that that we've got to try and sort out in the next. We've only got 3 more games: one SAA game, 2 Springbok games, and once that's done, then that's the season, and all of a sudden we're into a World Cup year. So, there's not a lot we can do to salvage the season. There's not a lot we can do to make this a fantastic year. I think it'll always go down as a year of building, and you don't always want to talk about a year of building, but it has been a year where it's very obviously that the World Cup is the main focus, and some people disagree with it, but I think it's a case of you don't want to be a side that's always in transition. You don't want to be a side that's always looking at. We're always building for the World Cup. We don't really care what's going on. But at the same time, I can tell you right now, you go and win the World Cup next year, you can't argue the caliber of this Boks side because they would have won 2 World Cups and a British and Irish Lions series. You could sit there saying, oh, well, they had a bad 2022. Who's going to care? No one's going to care. That's the reality. We could have lost every single game this year. If we win the World Cup next year, nobody cares. And whilst we might say, oh, no, we do care, we don't really. If we win the World Cup, nobody will care what happened this year, and that's just a fact. So you can understand from that perspective why the Springbok coaches and the Springbok management, Springbok setup is so adamant. The World Cup is our big one. That's what we're aiming for. That's what we're worried about. But we don't like to lose games. It's not great losing games. As much as people sitting there saying the world rankings mean nothing. They do, whilst they don't always sort of show who is the best team in the world, it's one of those things. If you are the number one ranked side in the world, you're the number one ranked side in the world. Who wouldn't want to be the number one ranked side in the world? Whether you believe it's the best way of representing it, then that's a whole different thing. So, but at the end of the day, if the Boks were the number one ranked side in the world right now and we won the Rugby Championship, all the pressure would be off because you'd be sitting there saying, well, we've lost a couple of games, but we're the number one side in the world. We're the current world champions. We beat the British and Irish Lions. Life is good, but it's not the case. So, and again, that then could have questions. Well, we're not that. We're no longer the number one side in the world. In fact, we could be dropping down to like 5th, for example, if things really go badly. But what are we gaining? And, for example, have we built depth this year? Well, I think we have. I think we have. Kurt Lawrence has been a revelation. He will go to the World Cup. That's now, as long as he's fit, that's now a guarantee rather than a, maybe. Where, if you look at Ulrich Lowe and Evan Lewis, for example, they're now implemented into the Boks system. Evan Lewis will have minutes this weekend and could very well start against England. We've brought in, I think Oxen Chair is now fitted in very nicely and looking very comfortable at this level. Damien Willemse at 10 has been it's hard to say whether it's been a success or not, but he's been gotten minutes at 10, and I think that's the main thing. We've brought in Jaden Hendrickson, for example. So there has been a little bit of development, maybe not as much as we'd like, and we'll sort of see tonight and on Saturday, where the rest of the potential development can be. But there definitely has been some sort of aspects that we've answered. Now there are obviously a lot of question marks. For example, everybody's worrying about the Springbok more. Everybody's going, this was the dominant force. This was one of our biggest weapons, and now it doesn't work. What do we do? And we did see a much better Maul last week. We scored the try off the back of it. And I think that was a bit of a positive. I think our scrums are still pretty good. I don't think they're phenomenal, but I think they're pretty good. And everybody obviously sort of questioning, and I think it's to be honest, I think it's pretty lazy analysis I found when people sit there saying we play the same, because if you go back and look at every single game, there's definitely been different games where we've played different sort of tactics and stuff like that. It's very lazy to just say all the Boks do is box kick and give the possession away, because at the same time you'll sit there saying how cool is Caden Moody? You guys got to try and debut, which came from a box kick. Last week we saw ball in hand, for example. We didn't see us return kicks. So yes, there have been games which have been a bit of a slugfest where we very much have utilized a big kicking game, but most teams do. France is the number 2, side in the world. They kick the most in the world. So I do think it's also lazy to sit there and say that our first performance against Wales is exactly the same tactics we played against France last week. It wasn't. It just wasn't. So you look, for example, where did Ireland score the tries against the Boks? France, for example, scoring a more try against the Boks, which has always been considered boring rugby. New Zealand, for example, when they pumped Wales, and they did pump Wales, if you actually go look statistically, they never used their wings. They never went wide. They kept it within the forwards. They kept it within like the middle sort of section of the field. They didn't score tries out wide. They weren't, using these really big, expansive backline moves running in and the wings running in the corner. Caleb Clark didn't score a try. Was it Sevu Reece who was on the other wing? I think it was. He didn't score a try, for example. I actually don't know if any backline player scored a try in that New Zealand versus Wales game. So yeah, it's yes, and I'm not saying that we can't improve. There's definitely room for improvement in this side, but for me, it's lazy to just say, oh well, we haven't progressed and there's been no change from the start of the first game to the end of the game, because there definitely has been. I think one thing which for me, everybody hops on about attack, and I understand why, because everybody wants to watch champagne rugby, don't we? We all want to watch cool trials. We all want to watch, slick passing, innovation, all that kind of thing. But what I will say is that our defense right now is looking far more like the World Cup than it was earlier this year. Our defense has definitely taken big steps in the last couple of months, and that's a very good spot to be in, because we won that World Cup in 2019 on the back of a defense that which wouldn't sit down, and it was a wall. And that defense was really a massive part of our success. So there's no doubt that the defense has, for example, improved. So now it's adding that sort of the final piece of the panel of the puzzle, which is, a nice attack. But even that, international rugby is not necessarily about, these very intricate offloads and stuff like that. For example, Ireland are getting quite a nice balance. They do have a very nice, strong offload game within their forwards and stuff like that. And as a result, it makes for very nice rugby. But I think that Ireland are a side that can be beaten, and we almost did beat them, and they have been beaten this year. And they're number 1 in the side, and they deserve it. But I don't, it's not a perfect game plan. It's a game plan that can go wrong. We've seen New Zealand, and who are we're very unsure what their game plan is. Some days they do. You should go back to sort of the usual New Zealand skill sets, but also I think they have orientated to a far more tactical game with a tick-tack kicking game, for example. France, everybody sits there saying, oh, France is so like, France and the France of old has always been so sort of fluid and very innovative and stuff like that. France at the moment have a slug of a pack. They've just got this massive, dominant physical pack, which they then use in the backup. And yes, there are some very nice backline players. Anton Dupont creates a lot of special stuff during your games. But let's not take away from the fact that France, for the first time in a long time, have got a pack that can match almost any single pack in the world. And that's what they've used really as their weapon. Cyril Baille and Julien Marchand, for example, they've been 2 of their most important players throughout the entire year. Paul Willemse, for example, has come into his own. Now, Paul Willemse, 10 years ago, probably wouldn't have played for France because he's in the wrong mold. He was, too big, too slow, too, immobile. But now, that big, brute, punishing type player fits the France mold. And so it's interesting to see how certain teams have had to adapt, and where that adaptation has been to become very good sides, like the France pack, So yes, there is still a very nice brand of rugby that they play, and they do look at the offloads, and they've got very exciting backline players. And Gregory Aldridge, for example, is a very nice ball carrier. But let's not take away from the fact that they've got an enormous pack, and they'll dominate you up front. Earning the right to then go wide and stuff. So, look, some of the comments, stuff like that. Vic saying that SA needs to win by 20 tonight. Talking about if Bristol are a strong team. They're a very good club. They're having a poor season. I think they're actually sitting second last next to Newcastle Falcons. It doesn't help that obviously there are two teams that aren't currently in the Premiership. So they're sitting in 10th with 13 points. They've won just the 2 games this year, but yeah. So but historically and in the past have been quite a good side. There's some good players in there tonight. Callum Sheedy, for example, is a very nice player who's starting at 10 tonight. Very keen to see how he goes. But some of the other comments saying, Alpha Lincoln saying it's good we're trying to back up in the second row and centre combination. TM Vandenberg says, in terms of World Cup prep, I feel we're in a better spot in 22 than we were in 2018. Year fine margins seek answers. Interesting point. As Vic says, we win the World Cup, all will be forgiven, and will be. Would you rather take Ulrich or Roos to the World Cup? It depends, doesn't it? Evan Roos probably the more exciting player if he's starting, but Ulrich Lowe is a better squad player because he covers more positions. Which is why I think he's had an easier way into the box setup. So if Evan Roos is going to start, if they're both starting, I think Evan Roos is probably he could be your ace in the hole. If you can get him right, you've got something very special. But if you're taking him as a squad player and somebody adds squad depth, Ulrich Lowe just ticks so many more boxes. He can play across that back row. Very hard grafter. Brings a lot more to a squad from a utility point of view than Evan Roos does. Not Everyday Culture says our lineouts were really poor last game. I thought our mauls and scrums were solid. Jan says we must continue playing with ball in hand the way we played against France. Hazard saying going to be interesting to see Sasha play tonight. He hasn't been tested properly at all. Started only 2 URC games. This is also the first time he's ever started at this level at 10. He's never played a senior game rugby at 10. Fun fact. So whilst he played there for the under-20s, it's still age group rugby. So it will be a very big test of Sasha Ngomazulu tonight, Feinberg and Ngomazulu. I'm very keen to see how he goes. Because he's obviously a prodigious talent. Everybody talks about the fact he has to go to the World Cup. I wouldn't take him to the World Cup. He won't even be a Springbok by the time we get to next year. Unless he suddenly plays next week. But why would he play next week? I don't see him playing next week. So yeah, so it's a big game for him tonight. And we will see what he can do at fly half, and hopefully he'll have a really good game, and they'll be like cool. But then he needs to go back to the Stormers. He needs to define his game, and I think he very himself understands that. I think the problem is he's getting hyped by so many people. He's very happy to do the hard yards. When we spoke to him at the URC launch, he's very cognizant of the fact that young players have been pushed up early and the injury issues that he needs to progress at the right rate, and he wants to learn. He's saying that, for example, people were still talking about the fact he's after Monty Liebach's 10 jersey. He was like, well, he'd actually love to play with Monty Liebach. He'd love to play with Damien Willemse. Whether that means that he's at 10 and Willemse at 12, Monty Liebach at 15, or he's at 10, or Liebach's at 10, he's at 12, Willemse at 15, or let's say whatever. So he's a player, and he's a young man, and that's why I think he will be successful. He's willing to wait and willing to develop, and understands that he's got to add to his game, that he's not just going to walk into the international setup and dominate. So he's very much understands that, which is a good place to be in as a youngster. But Connor saying, Bars a different style of rugby. Critical saying, I think we would have beaten Ireland and France if we had a good kicker. Majority of our points come from penalties in the right areas. The starting 3 points we were exceeding well. I don't think you can use that excuse for France because we were flawless with the team. We didn't miss a single one. Then Box will win by and improving. Italy will be able to fight Box by 12. Let's say we were 6 out of 6 for the French game, so I don't think it's that fair to say we would have won if he had a good kicker, because there weren't easy ones. I mean, Faf de Klerk slotted one from the touch line. Ches and Colby slotted one from about 45 meters out on the left hand side. None of them were really straight in front, so it was a very good goal kicking performance from the Box in that French game. The Irish game, we make kicks, we win the game. It's that simple. We missed far too many easy opportunities, and that happens. And it was interesting because obviously then we had a whole week of, well, there's no recognized goal kicker. We have to have a recognized goal kicker. What are you guys doing? Where's the recognized goal kicker? And all of a sudden, Faf de Klerk nails 2 really difficult kicks. Ches and Colby nails 2 difficult kicks, and Dan Willemse steps up and says, I can also do this, and nails 45-yard. It was pretty much in front. It wasn't particularly difficult, but it wasn't a gimme, and he still had to do it, and he did do it. So. Yeah, I think maybe that's also been a bit of a positive. The fact that we maybe actually do have other goal kickers, that Ches and Colby and Faf de Klerk can do a job. The problem is, for example, that they won't go back to their clubs and kick their clubs. Maybe Faf will kick in Japan, and that'll help him, for example, because you want people who are practicing in the pressure, and it's very easy to slot kicks in the training ground. On the field during high pressure moments, it's a completely different ball game, and there's only one way you can replicate that, and that's by doing it in games. So that's the biggest problem, is that those people just genuinely don't and won't kick for their various sides and stuff like that. So it's difficult to get that sort of exposure. Burgess says we are in a strong position, didn't get the results we wanted, but we are operating about 78% of what we're capable of and almost beat number 1 and 2 in the world when we Cuckle hit the fan. Nicholas saying, does Sasha starting tonight and Hurs's performance probably mean the block coaching have resigned to not taking Hurs to the World Cup? Earlier this year, I think he was second choice. I think his World Cup chances has taken a knock. I don't think he played particularly well last week, for example. So I do think that he is now a bit further than he was away from that box squad. I wouldn't say he's out of the plans completely, but I think the big thing for him is he needs to go back to the Bulls. He needs to play, and he needs to find form, and he needs to really show that he can still do it. Because he's coming back from a long-term injury. He has taken a while to get going, which is normal, but we can't really wait on him, can we? We can't wait on him to then just be good enough. We've got to be able to rely on him. And at the moment, Johan Hussen shouldn't be starting in the World Cup final, for example. He's just not playing the rugby at the moment. Because he hasn't played the rugby from a games time point of view, which is fine, as I said. But they wanted him to be an option, and he hasn't been able to play enough rugby this season even to make him that option that they wanted to have. My cousin's saying some tasty matchups tonight. Looking forward to the scrums. Max Lahee versus Mkunu. One to look out for. One to see how SAA centre pairing gets in front foot ball this week. Yeah, 100%. Max saying if we didn't have the performance versus Ireland, we would have been worse off against France. Vic says, with Liebach kicking the way he is, it'll be hard to put Hurston above him unless Hurston gets better. Yeah, but also, we also want to see some game time for Mike Liebach. I'm hoping we will see about 20 minutes from him this weekend. And then maybe another 20 minutes for him next week. And all of a sudden he can leave with 3 caps under his belt, a bit of Springbok time. Not phenomenal minutes, but I don't think he's ever going to get a lot of minutes. But he will be a Springbok cap player. He will be an option. And if he comes well and he's okay in those couple of minutes, then you sit there going, cool, well, let's look to try and give him a bit more time. Maybe in that incoming series next year, we give him a start and he can become an option for the World Cup. That is a genuine option, which is what we want to see. But yeah, we know he hasn't played that much this November series, and I don't think he ever was. I think people were dreamy if you thought that he was going to start from the get-go. Damian Williams was always going to be the preferred fly half for the season for this end of year tour, and they wanted to give him minutes there, and they have given him minutes there. So Mamoni Level will get his opportunity. Everybody will get the opportunity. Everybody was complaining about Evan Ruiz, for example. He will get his opportunity. Jasper Bisa doesn't play the next weekend, for example. So then are you going to be putting Kwaka Smith at 8, or are you going to be putting Evan Ruiz at 8? We wait and see. If Evan Ruiz comes off the bench this weekend, puts in a really big shift, then I don't see why you don't play Evan Ruiz at 8 next week against England. Which your test matches don't get much bigger than that. Playing at Twickenham, against in front of 80,000 people against the side that you beat to win the World Cup. So yeah, players will get the opportunity, but you also can't just people everybody slammed the stream of management when we did change it up and we gave Evan Ruiz a start against Wales and all this completely different look side. And everybody was like, no, well, this is not how you grow depth. You've got to introduce them, etc., etc. Well, now they are doing that, and people then say nobody should be starting. So I do feel that a lot of it is a catch-22 where there is no winner, really, because some people are insisting that Ruiz has to start. Other people are saying he has to be introduced into the setup, and what is the correct way to do it? There is no necessarily correct way. Some players are different. Some players really enjoy, some players benefit from being introduced slowly and getting used to it. Some players are dropped into the deep end and they just fly. Curtly Aronson, Kane Moody, for example. These are players who are dropped into the deep end and did very well. Kane Moody, for example, though, had a fantastic first game and I'd say a pretty average second game. And they wouldn't say play badly, but there are things that you have to work out at international level, and it takes time to do that. Don Smith says, have we had good forwards performances? Proudfoot left after the World Cup. Yeah, well, we did dominate. We did beat the British Irish Lions. And I would say that the forwards did stand up then. So yeah, we have, I think. And I thought last week we really had a very good dominant performance from a forwards perspective. Nicholas said, we'd love to see Johan Kovalov getting game time next year before the World Cup. Would have him as third choice hooker, but I think they'll take Dion. Yeah, I think they'll take Dion as well, because then they can take somebody else. Because if you take Dion as your third choice hooker / flank, first of all, he does cover those 2 positions. So if there is an injury to Bongi Mbonambi or Malcolm Marx, he can slot in there during the World Cup. But the more important thing is it means that they can look and bring in somebody else, another loose forward or another backline player, for example. So I think that Dion Fourie makes it so much easier to bring a much broader, more diverse squad than just taking a third hooker. Contender says Hendrickson should shift onto the wing second half when Hurston comes on. Hendricks should, when Hurston comes on. Herschel Yankees is pretty much no longer has a place for the World Cup squad with 3 kilometers ahead of him, 100%. Fixtures, Grant Williams can be challenging the Kubas Renner role in the main team. They play the same way. Grant Williams is just the younger version that's on form. Yeah, I'm very keen to see how he goes from the get-go this evening. I'm very much looking out for Williams, Lombard, Fabian Gomezulu, Henk van Wyk, those sort of youngsters who I think those are players who could be putting themselves on the World Cup radar. Probably not so much Fabian Gomezulu, but I do think Henk van Wyk could find himself on the radar if there are injuries to a Jesse Creel or a Lekanya. Obviously, we're also looking at Damien Delaney there this weekend, see if he could do a job. So, for example, you have Henk van Wyk putting in a worldy performance tonight. You then have Damien Delaney struggle at 13 on Saturday. You get an injury to Lekanya or Jesse Creel, you're probably sitting there going, right, we need another outside centre. I think Johnny Lombard's a very interesting prospect. We're talking about Johan Hurston coming into the squad, but he's somebody that offers you a lot of versatility, 10, 15, probably at 12 as well. Grant Williams, I think, is very much pushing, for that extra spot. I think he'll be very unlucky because I think it's probably between him and Kubas Renner for who will go to the World Cup, and probably both quite deserving, for example. Says, why do you think Gonzalo got fast-tracked? He hasn't shown himself at all in the top tier rugby. Maybe it was that performance against Zebra. I put out a thing to say that I think that, the whole thing of him being on the England radar did play a role, and I got absolutely taken apart. I was told that he's generational, I need to watch him play, he's the next Dan Carter. But, as you say, if we're being brutally honest, whilst he's looked very comfortable at the level, he hasn't exactly, slammed the doors down at URC level. He's only played like 3 or 4 matches. He's only started twice. And for example, that match against the Lions, he had a really poor first half and then a good second half. So he has been fast tracked. Under S20, he was brilliant. And I think we all know that he's a very good talent. But I think, just tying him down for the future is part of it. And everybody says, no, completely disagree, whatever it is. I think you're ignorant if you don't think it is part of it. Because Jordan Hendricks, for example, if you're looking at a 10, Jordan Hendricks is more deserving on form, even though he hasn't started the season phenomenally. In the last 12 months, Jordan Hendricks is more deserving of a spot in the Springbok side than Sasha Fabian Gomezulu is. Buddha Chamberlain is more deserving of a spot in the Springbok side. Chris Smith is definitely more deserving, from a form perspective. But he's young and he's been fast-tracked in the system. And I do think a lot of it's to say, well, listen, you will be a Springbok. You're going to be a good Springbok. So, we do believe in you. Don't even think about going to an England, for example. This is where you guys belong and we want to get you involved. And that's not a bad thing. Sitting there saying that it's playing a role isn't a bad thing. I think the Boks would be stupid if there was a small chance that he might go and play for England and they don't sit there saying, well, then we need to keep him here. Why wouldn't you do that? It should be dumb if you didn't. We see nations all the time capping players because World Rugby laws have changed, that you can play for other nations and stuff like that. So why not? Why not go and say, listen, we do back you in the future, so get involved now, but you're probably not going to go to the World Cup. I think that's fair. I don't think there's much issue with it. I don't know why we have to get so episodic about the entire thing. Matthew says, might just be to secure service for SE 100%. Hoping to see Dion Free next week. I felt this week was a good opportunity to give Dion Free a genuine chance to buck jersey at hooker. Be a bit hard on him, but I mean to push back to 2 jersey. I don't think we'll see Dion Free starting at hooker, for example. Maybe covering it, but I don't think we'll see him start. Nicholas saying, surely that last back spot for the World Cup is between Corsi and Moody. Corsi would have played for 2 years and Moody's still young. Yeah, I think that, and I think Stu and Corsi is now in a bit of a race against time because I think he would have played a lot. I think he would have played ahead of probably even potentially ahead of Kirtley at 11 this end of year series. But yeah, not to be. So all of a sudden he's now somebody who hasn't played a lot of international rugby in the last few years, and what do you do with him? But Matt says if a player plays for SAA, technically they can't play for another nation. Don't know if that has changed. I think you still can. I don't know if it is sort of capped. Let's actually find out. That's exactly my point. Buddha Jordan Smith proving at highest level. Surely that's a kick in the other 10's face. Burgess says we missed an opportunity to bring in Jordan Henderson this year. Could have been a lot further down the road with him as potential fly-off option. Could have been another Aronson Moody. Albert Flinga says Rassi interview. He was asked why Sasha was fast tracked, and Rassi said it's his defense. Yeah, I mean I get that, but Jordan Hendrickson is that's got the defense. Jordan Hendricks is probably one of the best defenders at Lions. That guy for Flower, he makes 6, 7, 8 tackles every week. Defensively, he's as good, if not better, than obviously, and more, tested at this level. So, yeah. So Carlos says, how many Islanders were in that French team? No idea. To be fair, a lot of them, you know how often people who you'd assume aren't French are actually born in France, and then you'll see some guy, you'll assume that he is French, and turns out he actually wasn't born in France, he just moved there, for example. So not quite as simple as all of that. Genesis, could we see Thomas the Tank next week on the bench? I feel there could be some competition between him and Trevor for the swing prop role for Rugby World Cup. Yeah, I don't think we'll see Thomas tour next weekend. I think we'll see the same 6 props that we've been seeing the entire year, really. Not Jay Carlos says the box race to Lance for me is not a wing, only got 1 chance 50 and didn't even play bad. The biggest problem with Warren Calant is that he didn't make himself available for this interview tour, where he could have really put his hand up, but made himself unavailable to really settle into France, which is a nice thing for him. I suppose you can understand it from a certain degree, but I do think that he has compromised his Rugby World Cup chances. We're going to wrap up there, people. Thank you very much for jumping on. We will be live tonight I'll be live at about 9 o'clock, or just before 9, as we start bringing you the build-up. Kickoff is at 9:30 for SAA versus Bristol. We will obviously be live for it, so I'll see you guys all later on the watch-along. Please do smash like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well on the way out, and I'll see you guys all very soon.